Where in the world is Justin Moon? Are you on mute?
No?
Oh, there you are. You were missed last night. We had Austin Bit Devs last night. You weren't here.
Yes, it pains me. It pains me, but sometimes you have to go and actually build something. You know?
We were hoping for a demo last night. Freaks, I'm sitting down with the Fedi team. We got Justin Moon, our long lost awesome brother. He's sitting with Eric Syrian, who's off screen, and
Yeah, the
Obi
biggest.
as well. We're here to talk about Fedimints. Gentlemen, congratulations. It's been a big week for you. How are we all feeling? You guys get any sleep?
Not much.
Yeah,
So
Obi doesn't seem to sleep. He just is always going. It's amazing.
Yeah, we are slowly catching up. Like, has been a wild week. Like a lot of engagement on Twitter, and slowly but surely we are getting back to building, which is great.
A lot of engagement, a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of people saying, "Hey, what's going on here? Is this trade off worthwhile?" Why don't we just jump into the criticisms first? There's been a lot of people saying, "Hey, what is this? This federation's custodial Fedimints. Why are people excited about them? Why should the freaks out there be excited about Fedimints and Fedi particularly?"
Yeah, let me take this. It's totally a valid criticism, and I think it mostly comes from hardcore Bitcoiners that know how to self-custody their Bitcoin. But like something we've been discussing internally and also publicly a lot is an observation of which I think mostly Obi made me aware of this. Like most people that interact with Bitcoin actually don't do this through self-custody today. And so who we are targeting with Fedimint is not the super sovereign Bitcoiner that already has like 5 hardware wallets in a 3 out of 5 multi-sig setup with like geographically redundant backups. Like that's not who we want to like help first. It's not our primary target market. But who we actually want to help are the millions of people that cannot do that, that forced to use exchanges these days because they cannot figure out their backup story. They cannot just like not think about like how would they inherit or how would their heirs inherit their Bitcoin, for example. Like there are so many open questions for normal people that there exist technical solutions for that, but it's really hard to understand for most people. And I think the federated custody model makes a lot of sense in these cases, and that's where we're trying to help.
yeah, I completely agree. A friend of mine runs a Bitcoin exchange in Africa called Bitnob. Is the name of the exchange, and they are very focused at getting people to self custody there, like I did at CoinFloor. But with the best win in the world, they're running at 80% still are custodying on exchange, even though they really want to get it to much lower. And the biggest exchanges in Nigeria is Binance, actually, for users. And therefore, if they try every day to get people to self custody and they've managed to, with education and so on, get to 80%, then it's probably 95% with most other exchanges. And that's the problem, that we ultimately would love everybody to self custody, but there's a process, and what we definitely all want is to, as quickly as possible, to get them off exchanges, and then once we do that, we can slowly educate them up to be able to self custody.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead,
Another,
Justin.
another angle here is that we talked a little bit about, originally Fedimint started more as a privacy research project, and then there were some realizations that it could be useful for custody, as has been discussed here. But it also has some great properties for scalability. Like if you ask your average hardcore Bitcoiner, how are we going to get 8 billion people to own Bitcoin, right? Uh, you know, there aren't a lot of great answers to that currently. And I think Fedimint's one of the best ones that I've seen. Like we have maybe if I'm not talking at some point, I'll run out and grab this little box of Raspberry Pis we have. There's 4 of them. simulating kind of the first federation. And this thing can do as many transactions as Bitcoin itself. Just a couple little devices, a couple $100 worth of devices, adds a whole new Bitcoin's worth of scalability. Not only in terms of like on-chain UTXO scalability, but also scaling Lightning too. So you can have Lightning channels where you spread the the effort to maintain it, as well as the capital that is locked up, the time value of the money that's sitting in the channels. You spread this out over like 1,000, 10,000 users. So it's great for scaling both Lightning and Bitcoin. And that's another, I think, thing that, if you remember John Cantrell's tweets about how to get 8 billion people on Lightning, this is, he did the math, like, it'd take 2 years to do all the channel opens, for example. Like this is, it takes Lightning where it is and what its strengths are, kind of a hub and spoke thing, and turns that into a positive rather than a negative.
Well, I think this is a great part to jump into how the Fedimint protocol actually works and what you guys will be building at Fedi. How are users able to engage in this custody model? How is it providing privacy, and how is it providing scalability? How do these mints work in the first place?
So does Eric, you want to start on Fedimint and maybe Justin on Fedi?
Yeah, that's a good plan, because like Fedimint is the underlying protocol that will be powering Fedi. And as such, Fedimint consists out of like 3 main parts. First is the Bitcoin custody, where we hold the on-chain Bitcoin that people deposit into a federation. Second is the eCash part, where we issue these IOU tokens, these blindly assigned IOU tokens, the eCash tokens, to users. And that way they can prove to the federation that they actually paid in some money, some Bitcoin.
What is a federation? Just assume they know nothing.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. Like a federation is just a bunch of people running the Fedimint software. And like they're communicating over the internet with each other. You can imagine it like, for example, in Liquid, like Blockstream's Liquid protocol, like there are also a bunch of companies that run the server software, and they all talk to each other and manage the Bitcoin in Liquid network. And so you would just start your own little federation that manages like the Bitcoin of your federation.
Yeah, so I think it is like a multi-sig that is has some ability to be scripted. So all the participants in the multi-sig contract will send messages around each other and agree on, should we accept a deposit? Should we issue a withdrawal? Should we, incentivize a Lightning operator to do something? It's like a replicated state machine.
Yeah.
Every participant in this multi-sig, their software goes back and agrees on kind of how to transform the system.
Yeah, and the good thing about this model is that like even if 1 or 2 of these machines fail, depending on how many there are in total, the system can just continue to operate. And like that's a big benefit of federations, where you would actually go to all this trouble of having multiple computers run by multiple people. It's about resilience. For example, in our case, like with our specific setup, if less than 1/3 of the members fail, the system keeps running. If less than 2/3 of the members are malicious, nobody can steal any money. And like that's the great thing. Like even if like 1/3 to 2/3 was malicious, they couldn't even steal money. That's a big concern typically with these like custodial systems.
Why is that? Like, why is the threshold that high?
Like fundamentally, you can think of it as like, for example, a 2 of 3 multisig, and you can imagine then, like if one of the nodes fails, then you can still sign. If 2 fail, let's say it's 3 out of 4, because that's what we actually do. Like if 1 fails, you can still sign. If 2 fail, you cannot sign anymore, but nobody can take the money. If 3 are malicious, then they can just take the money. Like that would be a concrete setup. Like the minimum size of a federation is 4 people, and that works quite well.
Awesome. And so, as a Bitcoiner, somebody who has,
you can do with the so could you describe some of the interesting things that you can do with this setup? Like what is the eCash part? I kind of interrupted you asking what a federation is.
Right. Yeah, so I was describing the second part, which is the eCash, and what that means. Like eCash system is essentially a system to issue private IOU tokens. Like these tokens cannot be traced back to the user to whom they were issued, but they prove to the federation that the user has paid in some money at some previous point. And so if you go to the federation again with your token and tell the federation, hey, I want my Bitcoin back, then it should give you the Bitcoin. And then note down that like this token was spent and you cannot spend it again. But the federation doesn't have to know which user is actually requesting the withdrawal, which is like good for privacy. Like the great thing about the Fedimint protocol is it provides a decent default privacy. It has good scalability, and like as we discussed earlier, the trust model also works well with like building custody on top. So,
Yeah.
but these were only like two aspects of the Fedimint protocol. The third, I think, is most important actually, and that's that we can integrate with Lightning as our payment rails.
Yeah, so think of if, like, let's say I'm in one mint, and Marty, you're in another mint, and we want to do a transaction, right? If we both have IOUs issued from different third parties who don't know each other, we're kind of stuck. We can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. So you think of these little hubs, right? And they wouldn't at this point. They don't have a way to talk to each other, and that's where kind of Lightning comes in.
Yeah. So that was a great realization. Like as soon as you can both receive and pay Lightning invoices or money via Lightning using a federation, then actually all these federations become interconnected, and even more so you become interconnected with the wider Lightning economy, which is steadily growing. So what we end up with the system is that you essentially have a semi-custodial or like a custodial but trust minimized Lightning wallet or Lightning protocol. So and that's where actually the app comes in, because currently I was always talking about the protocol, but there's a big step missing. We need to bring this to users. Otherwise, all our work would be for nothing, because what we want to achieve is that this is the default way, or like a good alternative to custodial solutions, and that people will use it. Like my grandmother could use it. That would be ideal. Yeah, and that's, I think, where I should hand off to Justin.
Well, I was going to say this. I think this is a great time to dive into like the details of how one transfers from one federation to another over Lightning. You're taking eCash tokens from the one federation, turning it into sats, sending it over Lightning, and then sats are getting turned into that eCash token, correct? And how does
the nice thing about it is that by default, these eCash tokens represent sats already. So there's no exchange or anything involved. So the thing we do actually is like we have like wrapped Bitcoin in a sense. Like these Bitcoin are in like the Federation. The Federation has custody of them, but they allows the users, if they can present the eCash token, to decide what should happen to these Bitcoin. And one of the things that you could do with the Bitcoin is pay Lightning invoice. And then on the other side, you get like these custodial Bitcoins as eCash tokens again.
Yeah. So in terms of how it works on the Lightning side, one thing that's interesting about Lightning now is you have all these people who've been tinkering on it for like 4 years, and they're, some of them are very good at operating a Lightning node. They've done it for years. They can keep it online. They can manage liquidity. And like a lot of these people are just doing it for themselves, right? Like I've been watching some of Eric's experiments with his node, and he has so much expertise relative to how much actual payments he's probably using it for, right? Like many of the Lightning tinkerers, right? So an interesting thing about Fedimint is that any Lightning node operator could go to a federation, and if they trust that the federation's IOUs are honest, that they'll be redeemed, if they're willing to hold a balance of these IOUs, then they could go and serve as a LSP. Basically, we've called them gateways, same thing. And basically, what this is they basically transform the types of Bitcoin, right? The IOU token to Lightning Bitcoin, right? Outgoing and incoming. So the way it works is kind of like a little escrow contract that is mediated by the federation. So, for example, if you want to pay, let's say I'm a user with an app, right? And I got the Fedi app, and Marty is he's selling a thought on the internet. I don't know if he still does that. I know he used to sell thought on the internet. So Marty is trying to sell a thought, absolute scammer, but he's selling a thought. And so he's got a Lightning invoice, and so I see the Lightning invoice and I want to pay it, right? And so what I do is I take a little bit of my eCash tokens and I deposit them into an escrow inside the Federation. And inside this escrow contract, it has a payment hash. And the Federation's job is anytime, they're just going to sit on this until somebody can present a pre-image that matches this payment hash. And if they do, they will get my escrowed eCash tokens, right? And so, it's a simple escrow. And so what I do next after I set up this escrow inside the Federation is I go to the gateway and I say, hey, gateway, I just set up this contract. Here is, currently we have to give them the whole invoice. We've been having some interesting conversations about how we can do this in a more privacy preserving way. We say, hey, gateway, here's an invoice. If you go pay this, send that, and then present the pre-image. Paying on Lightning just means you go and get a pre-image. If you can go present the pre-image to the Federation, you get Justin's custody, or you get Justin's escrowed eCash tokens. So that's how it works. TLDR, it's like the Federation sort of is the judge of an escrow, and any Lightning node on the internet, as long as they trust the Federation, can come in and serve this role. So we see kind of like an active market of like a very open system a very open ecosystem of nodes being able to serve these federations based on how well they are, how good they are at running a Lightning node.
Yeah. So actually, this escrow contract in the Federation is nothing else than the HTLC. Like it's just in a different execution environment. And the main thing that the LSP does, or the Lightning Gateway, is it bridges the trust. Like it goes from the trustless Lightning network to the somewhat trusted Federation model, and in both directions.
Yeah, it's like an extra hop in the Lightning, on a Lightning route, except for now this is like outside of the Bolt context, right? Like it's just like a kind of an extension where the last hop, it goes and leaves the traditional thing, but it's still doing the same thing, just buying and selling a pre-image.
And so in terms of the Lightning Network, Lightning wallets, LSPs, is there anything on the Lightning wallet infrastructure side that will need to be implemented to be compatible with this?
Yeah. There's lots of this is one of the recent little things we've just added recently is a plugin to core Lightning that allows you to receive Bitcoin on behalf of a Federation user, right? And so this is like a little piece of infrastructure that we need. We don't have a way to do this with LND yet, but we'll have to do something like that. We'll have to, a lot of like little command line tools like this, probably some like kind of rebalancing tools between the eCash tokens and Lightning channels, stuff like that. But on a fundamental sense, these are like almost like tooling. On a fundamental sense, it's not really like no changes to Lightning or anything.
I think that's the important part. Like we don't need any changes to the Lightning protocol as it exists today.
Yeah, that's the if you want to take away something from why Fedimint is interesting, is like a lot of the stuff you listen to, if you listen to podcasts or technical podcasts and you hear about new proposals, hear about new fancy things on Twitter, a lot of the times that you can't actually do that yet, right? A lot of these things require changes to Bitcoin. And if you get it, you understand that one of the most important things about Bitcoin is it's very hard to change, right? That's one of the reasons why your money's relatively safe. And so that's a good thing about Fedimint, is that it works with Bitcoin as it is. If there's never another soft fork, we can continue to execute our whole grand vision.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's a phrase we say about maximum simplicity, and Justin's being quite modest, but just on the C Lightning, for example, if you wanted to be able to become a Lightning gateway, that would involve, at the moment, and correct me if that's changed, but you've got it. Justin got to the point where it's one file, you put in one directory, and you issue a command to load that, or you restart the Lightning node, and that's it, you're done. That's the upgrade, for example, and that's what we want to have for every aspect of the system. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, one thing is, I think that, I think it should be something where within 10 minutes, if somebody would like to, and they know how to run a Lightning node, they can be serving a federation, right? Within 5 or 10 minutes, they could be fully up to speed. Like eventually, it's not there yet, but it should be really, really quick.
Because the important part here is when we are talking about these federations, we're assuming that they will be run by local communities, for example. And like, why would, for example, a big LSP that's doing their LSP business commercially trust such a local community and hold their eCash tokens and be their LSP? Like, that doesn't really work. Like, the federation would have to KYC with them so they feel comfortable. And that's not good. But what we want instead is enable like local community members that are running Lightning nodes anyway, or like maybe just friends of theirs that run Lightning node. To become an LSP in a really simple fashion, just very simply to connect to the federation, and then from there on, like the LSP tool will do everything automatically in the background. Like you manage like your channel balances and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but that's like normal Lightning business. Like there are tools to automate that, and we're not getting into that. But on the federation side, it should be as simple as possible.
And so, Justin, you mentioned the grand vision of Fedi. Let's talk about that. So you guys just mentioned there you like these federations to spin up in local communities. What does this look like in the global south? Or do you envision federation members being in the same city? Do you think it's wise for federation members to be more geographically distributed? What does it look like when these federations begin spinning up in your mind?
Well, this is something that Obi's looked into more in terms of like the deployment, so I'll let him speak on that next. But I just want to say that I think it'll be local, and I think that's really interesting because like we're, like especially there's we live in a world now where there's like a few monstrous institutions that like control everything, and there's like the middle sort of hollowed out. And so that's what I would like to see. It is kind of like more the local, the middle, regional, right? Like less centralized in general. And so, yeah, like in terms of how the deployments will work in some of our target markets, I'd defer to Obi on that one because he's just done a lot more speaking to our target users.
So thank you for that. I think in summary, if I've spoken to dozens of different people, and if I speak to X people, I get X different potential topologies, which is really good because that just tells you you've got this very, very flexible base level tool. So that's the first thing that increasingly gets me more and more excited. But some examples are local. You could say it could be really small groups. I was talking to someone the other day where people who hold a Bitcoin and they are effectively looking to make a Fedimint federation where they may not, they believe at least at the beginning, not have anyone other than the federation guardians themselves being a member at that level. So it could be 6 people effectively having each other's back. That's at one extreme. Then you've got, what will probably naturally happen there is their friends and family will effectively start treating some of them as like Uncle Jims. I think that's the phrase. And so it starts to extend out from that point. So that's one topology, which is local. You can see it and looking at what's happened with Galoy, etc., and Bitcoin Beach. You can have topologies around villages or towns and so on, where still I would consider that local, where people visually recognize most, if not all, of the other people there. You can also have situations where a community can have elements of the community who are international. So, for example, if you've got a village in Nigeria, my family's village in Nigeria, for example, we have many relatives who live in Europe and US, UK, etc., European Union, so because UK is in Europe. They don't always remember that. But they send a lot of money back home and they tend to be educated doctors, academics, etc., back home to their families, villages, in say Nigeria. An example of a federation that has been discussed there is that the sort of educated, affluent givers from the diaspora could be running the federations, guardians, and their families back home who they're already giving money to, and they might represent a large part of the income for their family back home, are using them as a decentralized set of guardians, because it sort of aligns with the trust model. Why would I just give you money, a large percent of a paycheck, to just steal it back from you? It makes very little sense. And then at the extreme, you've got two larger type scenarios where organizations can set up. For example, BitNob is looking, when we're ready to go, and there's another exchange in Middle East who has a similar idea. They want to get their customers to self-custody. They have problems with the cost of self-custody properly when you're using hardware wallets and so on. Sometimes they have issues with the logistics of it as well. They see this as a potentially lower cost, but still off exchange way of offering custody to their users. So if people want to go off the exchange, they just download an app and potentially scan a QR code and have privacy, but still have a exchange-like experience, but not be on an exchange. But the exchange would have one of the guardians, but they will work with other large organizations recognized in the community. For example, in still discussions, of course, but some ideas have been other human rights or humanitarian organizations, large religious organizations like large respected churches might have one, and so on and so forth, to form a federation that way, which whatever makes sense for the local country. And that could have, in the case of say BitNob, tens, if not 100,000+ people on that one, for example. So we have everything from large federations right down to 5 people have been discussed.
And so you mentioned the goal of Fedimint and Fedi on top of Fedimint is to get people away from custodying Bitcoin on exchanges. Sounds like what you guys are describing, this could be an onboarding mechanism for people directly into the mint and then potentially onto Bitcoin without ever touching a centralized exchange.
That would be my absolute dream. And so there was you see it on the Bitcoiner jobs sites. Justin and Eric described it, and I really like that phrasing. We're trying to build circular economies. And the base of a circular economy is the custody. So we will be thinking a lot about not just getting people to custody, but then to start to how do they then make sure it's a circular economy and they continue to use and operate and use as part of their daily driver for their lives. But more on that down the line, I think.
Because you can envision a world, right, where you create these circular economies. I really like the model where you have the affluent doctors that are sending money back home and they start the federation, they load it up with Bitcoin, tell their family members in Nigeria, download the Fedi app, I'll send you these tokens. And then they can go to their local community like, hey, we're using Fedi. Go to a merchant and say, hey, download this app and this is how I'll pay you. And so,
yeah, or they send it in and they think, well, okay, if I send it via MoneyGram or other payment systems like that, they can be paying hefty fees, really hefty fees. And then they have to wait, and then someone has to visit potentially a store to wait in line to receive the money, and they have to pay to get to the store. It might be open, it might be closed, and they are walking away with these large wadges of cash in plastic bags, and everybody knows you're walking around with large wadges of cash as you walk out of one of those stores. So then you have a personal threat of risk, as opposed to at your home, you use your mobile, because mobile penetration is very high. By 2025, we're looking at over 50% of phones will be smartphones in the world, 75% penetration. Just imagine you can just pick up your phone, talk to your loved one abroad, and they just send the money straight to your phone like that. It's with no costs going to a MoneyGram or a Western Union or so on.
And so for that individual receiving money from their family member, sending it from abroad, let's talk about the security model of downloading Fedi, getting these eCash tokens. Like, what does the backup look like? How do you recover if you lose your phone? What is the fail-safe model here?
Yeah, so I'll start, and then I'll on some of the recovery stuff. I'll defer to Eric. So the first thing is, you at least in the our early design so far, the first thing you need to do is join a federation, and there's, I think, two ways most people do that. Like, one, they might get a link that like encodes it as a URL parameter. So you download this is usually used for ads and stuff to track where the download came from. But we could just say like, hey, like, join this federation, and then as soon as it showed up, the app loaded up, they'd see some piece of information that they'd cross check with whoever invited them to the federation, something like that. Or they would just say, scan a QR code, enter maybe a link, paste in a link that would just go and register with the federation, download the configs required to interact with the federation. Like, where are the servers? What are the public keys for the multi-sig, for deposits? What are the public keys for all these Zcash tokens? Stuff like that. And then once you're at that point, it's, there's like one button, receive Bitcoin. Once you have some Bitcoin, two buttons, send and receive. So the idea is to just be like, just really simple. Anyone who can use an app should be able to use this app. And there's just the first step of figuring out which federation you're gonna be working with. That's the only complication. And then in terms of the recovery side, I'd ask Eric to give a little.
Yeah, so that was actually a realization that both Obi and I came to when we were talking to each other, like with this community custody model, where you essentially know the guardians that are running the federation. You get a great tool of doing Shamir secret shared backups, basically. Like, you can think of it when you sign up for the federation. Then what you could do is, if it's like a local community federation, then these people will know you by some name, for example. And the app would just ask you, please enter your name. And it will then generate a seed phrase from which all your money can be recovered, and encrypt that seed phrase and Shamir secret shared to all the guardians.
So what is Shamir secret sharing, for those who don't know?
That's a good question. It's a way of splitting up a secret into n parts, and as long as you can get t of these parts, like, for example, if you have a 4 out of 3 federation, then you would set n to 4 and t to 3, and then as long as you get these t parts of these shares, then you can recover the secret from that.
So it's a lot like multi-sig. It's just not related to Bitcoin. It's just of the secret itself. So it's not enforced by the blockchain. It's enforced by some cryptography off-chain.
Yeah. And so the trick there is, you generate the secret shares. You then put like a label on them, pretty much. Like, this secret share belongs to a person XYZ. Like, this secret share belongs to Eric. And everyone in my local community knows who I am. And I just give the secret shares to all the guardians. And then in the case that, for example, I lose my phone, I can physically go to my guardians and tell them, hey, you know me, I'm Eric, and I'm currently trying to recover my funds. Could you please give me back my share? And that would be kind of involved. You have to actually go to your guardians, but the sign-up process would be that simple. You just have to give some identifier by which your local community knows you. It might be just El Syrian in my case. And that's a superpower, I think, of these federations, because your trust model, you're trusting them with your money anyway. So why not actually trust them with your backup too? And they will probably be around for quite some time because they have to take care of your money. Like if they're just gone, then your money is gone too. So you probably have chosen people that are reliable for that.
Yeah.
And so it's just a great fit.
And
And that's super interesting. One, first of all, just on top of going up to them in person, you could contact them over Zoom or something like that, or a WhatsApp chat and have a video call. But if in that example, Eric went up and somehow I tried to recover and say, hey guys, I'm Eric and you're a member of or I'm Justin and you're one of the Guardians, you're going to know I'm not Justin. Yeah. I'm hoping you're going to know I'm not Justin. You didn't need my passport and selfie to know that.
Where's your mullet?
You just know it. You've got something better than KYC. You've got KYF. Know your friend, know your family. You just know it in a human level from interacting with that person. And so we're just we're leveraging that, which is much higher levels of knowledge of someone without the onerous, and that was voluntary given over a life of time spent with each other.
if I understand it correctly too, this recovery process, it doesn't give the Guardians visibility into your current balance at that time too. It just gives you access to spend again, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Like the only real risk there is that if the Guardians would would come together and conspire against you, like then they could, without your knowing, without your instruction, like decrypt the secret, and then they would be able to see your balance and past transactions. But actually, like Obi and I talked about this extensively, so we also got a solution for that. But as long as we assume the Federation to be honest, and we should do that because they own, like they hold the money for us.
Yeah.
Like if they are not honest, then we chose the wrong people. Then the recovery process works without telling them or without leaking anything about your holdings, about your past transaction history to them.
Yeah, so they would have to collaborate in a way that they could steal your money, but then they choose not to, right? They're just going to de-anonymize you. They're not going to choose your money. They're not going to steal your money. It's a little, it's somewhat. I mean, it could happen, but it's,
But just to in the middle of that, the recovery process will be you'd contact. Say you've got a 4-person federation, and you need 3 or 4 as the threshold. You would contact 3 via Zoom, WhatsApp, or in person. They would recognize you because they know you, and so they would basically say okay and send you back their share of that you sent to them, and you on your own within your Fedi app, for example, would reconstitute your key locally.
Yeah, I think something important to add here is that when I say like they give you back your share, that should be highly automated in the app.
Yeah,
like you would like when you lost your phone, you would get a new app. Like open it and tell it to please recover my previous wallet, and then it would let you enter your name again, and at that point like it submits your new public key, like some new information to the Federation, and then you would either reach out to them via Zoom, for example, or like they might even call you because they notice, hey, Eric is trying to recover his funds, I should call him. Is it actually him? Like ask him. And then they could, in their app, just click OK or decline, like depending if it was imposter, then we probably don't want to go through with this. Yeah, that should be the UX, like maximum simplicity all the way through.
Exactly. What's so cool about this is that, having run exchange, we had a program for very high net worths, and most exchanges have that. And then there are dedicated custodians who have this, the Unchains, the Casas, Anchorages, and so on, Fireblocks, and then you have Coinbase custody. We have the similar. And for those high-end customers, you'd charge a pretty penny for it. But fundamentally, they'll say if they lost their keys, you'd have a dedicated agent who they would get on a Zoom call with, and that person would look at some details for them to figure out if it is the person expected, and then they would potentially pass it to a second person who would go for a similar set of details, and then they would allow them to get back their balance. We've effectively replicated that, but for anyone, anywhere, for free, using people who know you even better than any agent for any third-party agent. So you get this sort of institutional grade like experience for recovering your key, white glove experience, but for free.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not for free. Maybe you invite your guardians for dinner once in a while. It's friends and family.
Well,
like,
the cost of building a relationship. Yeah. Thanks. You're right.
It's incredibly novel, and when you consider like the privacy and scalability benefits, it's mind blowing how this can get Bitcoin into the hands of the masses. And up to this point, we've been discussing a very rudimentary use case, which is simply sending and receiving these tokens, but there's much more you can do with Fedimint and that you can build on Fedi. I know, Justin, you did a hackathon project at Bitcoin Plus Plus where you injected simplicity into Fedimint. I guess we can begin to go there. Like, what else can you do beyond sending and receiving these tokens?
Yeah, I mean, this could be like it's like a federated program or contract execution environment. You can put anything that you can express really in a computer program. You could have these federation servers run and then agree on whether they got the same thing. Of course, there's some, you probably don't want to run Fibonacci, like you don't want to, there's certain programs you don't want to probably run, but I think this is going to be kind of a fruitful area of exploration because Fedimint is very modular. Like currently there's a consensus system for how these servers talk to each other. But everything else is, in terms of like what messages they actually send back and forth, what state they agree on, what contracts they enforce, all that's implemented in modules. So we have a module for an on-chain wallet, we have a module for the Chaumian Mint, and we have a module for Lightning to incentivize these Lightning node operators to fulfill payments on behalf of the users. And so you could put whatever you want in there. And so that, my idea was simplicity. So simplicity is it's intended. It's a very long running project from Blockstream. It's about eight or 9 years old. Created by a really brilliant guy named Russell Connor, and it's intended to be a replacement for Bitcoin script. That's the scripting language for Bitcoin Core. So if you ever heard of an HTLC, hash time lock contract, that's implemented in Bitcoin script, and that's about all that Bitcoin script can do. It can hash, it can time lock, and it can do signatures, right? And so the idea of Ethereum was like, let's basically run JavaScript inside of the blockchain, right? And that was a stupid idea because you can't tell when JavaScript is going to terminate. It could run forever. So then they have gas, right? So now it gets really complicated. You have to pay for every execution in your thing. And it's stupid. So simplicity was an idea that you can tell ahead of time how long a program is going to run for, and because they model it out really well. But it can express a lot of like the covenants that we have been discussing, like CTV and a lot of these ideas. I think recursive covenants. A lot of these could be implemented in simplicity. One problem with simplicity is it may never get deployed in Bitcoin, right? Because it's very invasive change. If I had to bet, there's maybe like a 1% chance it ever gets in. I would love to see it in, but I think it's low. But we could still use it in stuff like Liquid or Fedimint. And so that's a really cool thing. I mean, I think there's all kinds of stuff we could do here that, and it would make more sense to do it here than on some of these other like smart contract platforms.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Eric.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was only going to say one sentence. You think about Bitcoin as this layer 1, and then Lightning as this layer 2. And what's interesting with Fedimint is effectively we make potentially hundreds of thousands of bespoke to your requirement on a community level layer 3s. And you can pick and choose. You don't have to everybody have every feature.
Yeah, and I think the really a powerful realization of the federation concept is that you not always need the full trustlessness that Bitcoin provides. Like sometimes this trade-off is just worthwhile, and we can scale much better. Like for example, when you think about smart contract execution on Ethereum, like everyone needs to evaluate these contracts. That's in most cases not really useful. Like for example, if you had a local community that wants to do their land registry on the federation, why would they ever do this on a really public blockchain? There's no sense in it. The enforcement of the land registry of land ownership would be local anyway. So why not run it locally where it belongs? And as long as you have some smart contracting capability that you can interact with all these other systems like Bitcoin, like Lightning, then you're golden. Like you can suddenly sell and buy land for Lightning or Bitcoin sent via Lightning. And that would be awesome, I think. Many other opportunities for federations in general. Like something I will be looking into at some point is building generalized sidechains. Like we got this one big liquid sidechain by Blockstream, who is they are also funding my work, by the way. Like big shout out to Blockstream for letting me work on Fedimint. But eventually I will build a module that allows you to spin up your own sidechain, which would be awesome. Like just imagine people are discussing about OpCTV and writing long threads on email lists. What if we could just spin up a sidechain that has CTV and where a bunch of interested people like Jeremy Rubin and some others just act as guardians and they let people try out the technology. Nothing easier than that. And we have gotten some changes into Bitcoin 1 or 2 years ago with Signet that you can actually spin up your own sidechain kind of. And that would be super interesting to see being built on Fedimint.
Yeah, and it's much more organic. If they do that and people start finding value, then they say, you know what, we have our own community federation. We'll just take that module and add it to ours. And then if it's valuable, people will start to adopt it. But you don't have to get everyone in the world to adopt it before anybody gets utility from it.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things here is if what I hope to see in the world over the next 10 years is that you have some really high quality software that can be used by lots of people in some sort of a federated context like this, so that the stuff we're using in Austin or some of these expensive first world cities, right? They'd be using the same thing in Calcutta for something, or for example, right? In developing countries, and so if you could, if some of these Fedimint modules, if the client software develops a network effect, such that if you want some land registry, for example, right? There's just a extremely well-tested, battle-tested implementation, as well as client software that's beautiful and usable, and just any community in the world could spin that up. That's kind of a vision of the future that would get me pretty excited. It's kind of that it's still wild when you think about it that the phone and laptop that a college student has is the same one that Mark Zuckerberg has, right? What if we could bring some of that in terms of a phenomenon like that, but in terms of how people get to use Bitcoin, how people do banking, that. How different is that? The banking stuff that rich people have is not available to anyone else, right? Just two different ball games.
So you can have a Fedimint app store come to market and people just pick and plug as they see, right?
That would be a good, interesting idea.
Yeah, that's the vision. I mean, but so one of the things that appealed to me about this project is that it's both something that we can deploy in the next 6 months. It's actually real, unlike a lot of these research proposals. But also it would take better part of a decade to fully realize the vision, and so that's always something that's hard to find, right? Something that's both realistic but also would take a long time, a lot of dedicated effort. Those are the types of things I think we should really that's what Lightning was, right? They could deploy it, but it's also still only partially realized, right? It's going to take another decade for Lightning to fully form, and so maybe Fedimint could be another one of these sorts of things that we can really work on over a long period of time.
Yeah. Although I think because of the work and maturity of Bitcoin and Lightning, we can get to utility when we're saying 6 months time. We get utility for real people on the ground very soon after that, and then it just gets better and better and better over those 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, Obi, that's one thing you and I have talked about after your trip to Oslo is the scalability and the quickness to market that Fedi could provide. Like, let's talk about like how you see adoption playing out and how quickly it could scale up.
Well, how quickly it can scale up, I always defer to on the protocol Fedimint and on the app Fedi, because I was a engineer for many years, so I learned that we should defer. So the timelines I've given have always come from these guys, which is amazing because I think they're quite aggressive timelines. So on that front, but in terms of the adoption opportunities, as this product can be used by anyone, but the focus we have is some of the markets where it's needed the most. For one of a better phrase, it's the global south, but with particular focus on parts of the world, they tend to be under authoritarian rule or under the yoke of oppressive regimes. And they tend to have high levels of inflation. So they want something that protects them from that. They tend to have currency controls, so that it's very hard to access money that has lower levels of inflation. And because of the regimes they tend to be based under, they have low confidence in the local government, in the financial institutions that they have to rely upon. And as a result, they tend to have high levels of trust in community because they're forced to, because they have to rely on each other. So this is, you can imagine if you see how Fedimint works, it's fertile ground for something like that. And so we are looking to roll out to those markets. Now, we've talked to a number of people who literally have dedicated their lives to, on a local basis, support, help, give money to educate and protect people from those communities. These are NGOs, charities, not-for-profits, activist groups, human rights defender groups, and so on. And some of these are very large groups with footprints that cover hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of people. Also, separately, we're talking to institutions that, for example, as I say, exchanges that are based in some of these local jurisdictions, and they want to philosophically help those people improve them. They're there for the mission as well as to make money. And again, that you're doing something really impactful when the response is almost an immediate, like in the case of Bernard, I say him again, it's just like, yeah, I completely get it. Let's do this. I was going to make my own app. Why would I do that when this is effectively what I wanted to do, but 10 times better? We have people in all over the world, but there is a lot of interest, and we'll have to, we're setting up different projects for different regions because they know the market. They know how to locate the right people, educate them, and roll it out en masse. We have the product. So we'll be listening to them. It's likely we want to do it and they also want to do it in a trial first, make sure it works with a small group. But they have the ability, once we know it's working and we've covered some of the questions that make it work for that particular market, they know how to take it from 500 people to 50,000 people, because that's what they do day in, day out.
Yeah, it's very exciting when you consider the potential here. But I think this is a good opportunity just to steelman everything. Like, how could Fedimint or Fedi fail in your eyes? Like, what are the roadblocks, the potential hurdles that you guys are going to have to overcome as you're building out this open source protocol and the product on top of it?
I think one of the big ones is, this is one of the, there's a lot of ways it could fail, and that's why it's an interesting project to work on. There's a lot of, so if you're a developer who's talented, take a look. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Like one of the biggest ones is we just need the daemon, the server software to be extremely reliable, right? If anybody's run Bitcoin Core for a couple years, you'll come back to the server and it's still running. Even it's been every 10 minutes, it's doing its job, right? It's incredibly reliable. We need to achieve something like that. It's just got to never ever crash, right? And if the dog pulls the cord out and then you plug it back in, it's got to start right back up again, right? The database can't get corrupted. It's just gotta work. The basic functionality has to just work extremely well. I think another one is just making the setup easy, right? Like people generally aren't so good at running servers. That's a good thing about Fedimint is a few people running servers can serve thousands or more others. So I think if deployed, it will represent a reduction in the need to run servers by people, a little more specialization. But we need to make that really, really easy. It's got to be something that we can't require our guardians to be IT users because we want the individuals that people trust to be running these. So it's got to be relatively straightforward to set it up, right? Like Marty, we'd want you to be able to set it up in 5-10 minutes on your Nodl, right? Something like that. It's got to be like very simple, right? And that's hard to do. And then I think this recovery stuff, I'm not sure if this Chaumian eCache idea has been around for a while. Since the 82 or so, and it doesn't have a terribly successful record with deployment. So we have to. I think this recovery idea is a big one. But like that, Bitcoin's like a fundamental new design parameter here, right? Like Bitcoin has multisig that doesn't exist before. It's like a new, different, interesting thing, and so we kind of like leverage this new trust architecture. So I think we have a novel new take on things. So these are some of the things that
I think all the concerns you mentioned were mostly technical in nature, and actually there I have a little concern because it's a very interesting project, and we have a lot of very smart people that reached out to us and want to work on it, and so I think we will be able to overcome all of these. It will be a lot of work, but we'll manage to do it. What I find really fascinating about having Fedi as a company involved now is that we can actually do the also hard work of exploring and finding out what our target users actually want. What do we need to build for them to be able to use it day to day? And that's something open source projects haven't been as successful at, I think. And that's why it's really useful to have a company build a wallet based on the core protocol of Fedimint. Mm-hmm. Because now we can go into these markets, do our research, and then just tweak the very versatile protocol, which is Fedimint, to exactly fit their needs and be the best wallet they could imagine. And that's our goal.
And I think that's it was really interesting when Justin spoke to the technical risks. But from my side of looking at this, I have I've worked with a number of engineers and architects over the years, application architects over the years, and these guys are right up there at the top. And I mean hundreds. I was a CTO for 15 years before being a CEO, so I know when I meet someone or people who are just really, really good on a combination of levels. So if people want to get involved in this project, it's always good to be working with some of the best, and you're going to be working with some of the best here. So that's just going to be an incredibly and very humble people. So it's an incredible environment to work in. And that's why I feel that there's going to be challenges, but I feel very confident that they're going to fix or resolve them or make sure they all work. On the other side, I think that the risk that I see the most is that we will create a great product, people can use it and download it, but that we stop there. And we don't want to stop there. It's not just holding. Ultimately, we want people to use Bitcoin. Now that we've made a tool that's cheap, privacy preserving, relatively fast transactions, really good default level of security as well. Okay, that's the basic platform, but we have to solve the problem of creating a circular economy. That's an unsolved problem where at scale you've got a city or a town who you walk in and pretty much a large percentage of people, a large percentage of the places readily accept, readily use, readily pay with technology that's powered by Bitcoin. We need to that's the point that we have to get to and make sure that happens. It's unsolved, but again, unlike other projects, and though Fedi is ostensibly a company that creates this app, really it's a company dedicated to creating Bitcoin mass adoption, circular economies. Knowing that that's the base for it, we have the basic tool to be able to do that. And a key part is partnering with all these people who are on the ground, who know their community and know the problem that hopefully Fedi and Fedimint solves, and are willing to work around the clock till we figure out how to make sure this happens as a circular economy. But that's the one risk that we also don't create a circular economy. But again, my feeling is, given the wealth of skill that we've managed to amass on that side of things, that we will find solutions. And then we can just replicate. That's an issue of replicating and tuning over the next 10 years.
Yeah. Circular, I mean, that's like the thing in my mind. The circular economy obviously is like been a big meme in Bitcoin. We had the merchant adoption meme in 2013, and now as the price of Bitcoin has fallen, people are poo-pooing number go up and trying to entice people to use Bitcoin more. And that's why I'm particularly excited about your focus on the global South and that market, because it seems like they desperately need these tools. And that's the question in my mind. Do they get this tool and have an aha moment like, oh, this is the solution? And then it spreads like viral wildfire where they go to every merchant and they're like, download Fedi. This is what we're going to use from now on.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we're looking at in that respect, but ultimately we're going to run a number of experiments. Some of them might be there's a lot of money that goes into these various locations from the outside. One obvious example you stated is from the diaspora itself and others, educating people to put a percentage of that into being donated in the form of Bitcoin or running on Bitcoin rails as the mechanism for them to receive that. That's one area that we want to trial in certain places. There's also understanding who are the different actors, the commercial, the actors in a given jurisdiction, and that need to be focused and educated. And they're the sort of like linchpins who from them everybody else follows. Again, that's another area of investigation. So we might say, well, we make sure that these people are really comfortable in using it, because if they use it, everyone else follows them. And it's different depending on the culture and so on. And there's many other features as well, and parts to it. But all of these are with the higher level objective. How do we make sure they don't just download the app and install it and use it and then don't follow on from there? But there's some reason why they have to keep coming back to the app. Because that's the thing. If you have a really simple, easy to use app with everything, and there's a reason to keep coming back to it, then eventually the aha moments will happen.
And so, I mean, we started this discussion with the criticism of Fedimint after the launch because of the trade-off on the custody side, and a lot of that criticism revolved around we don't need mass adoption. Bitcoin doesn't need mass adoption. What would you say to people who are saying that Bitcoin doesn't need mass adoption? It just needs a core group of people who are holding their own private keys and self-custody and interacting in their own circular economy. Like, what is the case for mass adoption in your guys' perspective?
I mean, I think of it in terms of people need Bitcoin, right? Like, we've experienced that it's a great tool for freedom and for thriving, and it's helped all of us and it's helped a lot of our friends. And so you have sort of a responsibility to try to bring it to other people. Most people don't have it yet. And so that's what we're trying to do, is trying to help bring this to other people, right? Because that's what we should do. It's this great tool. You should bring it to as many people as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think there are two parts to this question. Like, first of all, if you believe that Bitcoin has such good monetary properties that adoption is inevitable, basically, because people see it as a way to preserve their wealth, then you really want to enable them to hold it in the most decentralized fashion possible, or in the most self-sovereign fashion possible. And that might not be everyone having big multi-sig with hardware wallets. That's probably not the case. Like, that's not possible. Like, we have to work with what is actually achievable and work inside this this mindset. So that's the first part. And secondly, if this wasn't the case and you wanted to keep Bitcoin this small fringe thing that people that like privacy, that like sovereignty use, how do you buy things? Like, if every time you want to buy some real world good, you have to go through an exchange, how much privacy can you actually achieve? How much self-sovereignty can you actually achieve? I don't think that's like a viable path forward, even for hardcore Bitcoiners that don't really want others to adopt it necessarily. It won't give you the sovereignty you're looking for, I think.
Yeah. I like to think about it, just hyper Bitcoinization for me is an end goal where everybody everywhere has the ability, if they so wish, to hold and use Bitcoin. If for whatever reason, for reasons of cost or reasons of fear or for reasons of regulatory exclusion, billions of people, and we're talking, if you add those things together, billions of people do not have access to being able to hold Bitcoin for one reason or another, then you cannot, by definition, have hyper Bitcoinization. So you're precluding that. And the second thing for me is money has a network effect. I think Eric mentioned it already to some degree. The more places, the value of your money and the value of the network goes up with Metcalfe. And so if you exclude half the people on the planet, say, from using it, it's not half as valuable. It's a tiny fraction of the value, as to the point where anywhere I go in any country, I can use this same token. It's far more useful than if it's only in these few places. So those are my two: the network effect of money, and also the desire ultimately for hyper Bitcoinization to be realized requires you to have a solution that works for everybody.
Yeah, and I think the individuals who are saying, "Oh, we don't need mass adoption," like it would be bad if we had a critical mass of people interacting with Bitcoin via these Fedimint federations. I don't want to call it a straw man, but it sort of paints the picture of, oh, if we get all this Bitcoin locked in these federations and something happens, everybody's going to get rug pulled. But I think the nature of distributed federations, where you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, really distributes that risk at a granular level.
Yeah, and yeah. I think we should be totally honest there. Like, there will probably be some rug pulls eventually. Like, if people don't choose their guardians carefully, like if they like just go with some random anonymous people that set up a federation, then that's a possibility. But the great thing about these federations being interconnected by Lightning is that none of them has to become so large that it would be a systemic risk to Bitcoin, first of all. Like, the damage would be localized. And on our mid to longer term roadmap is also that we want to enable people to hold their money on multiple federations. Like, you might choose one federation which is really local to you, where you really trust the people to hold most of your money. But it doesn't have such a good privacy set. Like, it might only be like your 500 people in your village. While when you want some more privacy to transact, then you might choose a different federation that has many more users, but you don't put that much money on that.
And also better liquidity on their
yeah,
Lightning
exactly.
nodes. More Lightning nodes, just the payment will be faster, stuff like that.
Yeah.
it's your purse federation versus your vault federation, as it were.
Yeah.
And at that point, then if they do rug pull you, it's it's the price of the dinner that you're going to pay to go out to that night.
Yeah.
It's the same as pickpocketed. That happens as well, but it doesn't mean that we should therefore get rid of purses because pickpocketing happens.
Yeah, and I'd be very interested to see if we find user interactions similar to what we've seen historically with mining pools. Like when Ghash got 55% of network hash rate, people moved off that pool rather quickly because they noticed a systemic risk potentially to a 51% attack. And like, could something similar happening at the federation level, where if individuals see a federation attaining X% of the overall liquidity in overall federations, they begin to move to mitigate that risk.
As I was saying, one thing on that actually as well. What I'm keen to see, but we'll take it step by step, is I think we're all keen to see is to include within the app reminders and education as well. So, for example, we might remind you, are you sure you know the guardians of this federation you're joining? If you don't, do not proceed. So that way, if someone tries to trick someone, hopefully the app can help minimize that as well.
And Justin, were you going to say something there before you froze up?
I forgot. We lost internet for a second. I forget what I was going to say.
I had just made the comment about like mining pools, people migrating off once they hit a certain critical mass, and then could something similar happen with federations? If people see one federation getting too big, they decide to move their funds off of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a really interesting thought experiment is we want to keep these federations honest. So what you could actually do is, like if the user wants that, then you could automate bank runs pretty much and just prove liquidity that way. Like there's some interesting ideas around like how can you keep them honest. Like if a federation gets too big, like you could have like a backup federation where your wallet automatically switches your funds to, and since it's all connected by Lightning, like as long as there's enough liquidity, it should be rather cheap to do so.
That's interesting.
And that's real proof of reserve.
Yeah.
Well, that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Obi.
So, no. I that's the first time I heard that idea, and I love thinking like that because we're all aligned on our objective. That's all.
Yeah, and we've been mentioning.
I gotta say, we take this very seriously on the Fedimint project too. There's a guy named Kitman who's a NIM. Just showed up randomly a couple months ago, and he's been doing a lot of great stuff on auditing, like every epoch, right? An epoch is like a block. Every epoch of the federation, like making sure everything adds up to zero, making sure everything, like the bank, the mint is fully backed every single moment, right? So like there's a lot of engineering problems here too that we've been, that are very exciting if anybody's a Rust developer.
Rust. Justin and I have been talking a lot about Rust. He's become infatuated with the language Rust. Rust is hot in the streets right now.
Ever since I like Fedi pilled him in Miami, like
we met at Jeremy Rubin's Plebfy event. Yeah, and I looked over and I saw I recognized his Twitter avatar. I have like a photographic memory for Twitter avatars, and I'm like, oh, you're Eric. And so we started talking. I was like, yeah, I'm never going to program again. I'm sick of it. And then over about a week later, I was cracking open the Rust editor and getting the compiler, getting it all going again. So I didn't last long there. Yeah, Rust is a really interesting language. You're seeing basically the entire ecosystem of Bitcoin slowly move towards it. So many of the new interesting projects are in Rust. It has a really nice developer experience. It's just as fast as C. It's safer. Code is relatively readable. Every once in a while, we run into rough edges right now. Like our module system can't be very easily expressed in Rust currently, but it's a lot of fun. And you can see, look at new projects being introduced in Bitcoin now. About half the time, there's a Rust code involved.
Mm-hmm. Obi, I know you have to go in 10 minutes, but I wanted to touch on the Lightning Network aspect of this. Obviously, federations will communicate and move funds between each other using the Lightning Network. What are the externalities for the Lightning Network if Fedimint reaches a critical mass of adoption? What will that do for liquidity and availability on the Lightning Network?
You guys want to add on that, or?
I mean, Eric might be he's the most sophisticated technical person here. I mean, from my point of view, like, think of the externalities of the Lightning Network. If everybody has a phone that's intermittently connected, running Lightning channels, comes on and offline, and, how well is it going to work if you have 5-6 hop payments across all these channels, right? Like, just when you think of, if you just to reverse the question, right? Like, that's not going to be a very reliable system. Not to say that people shouldn't do that, but if the whole network is like that, it might not be terribly reliable.
Yeah, I think you already touched on this earlier. Like when you're running an LSP for Federation, or the Lightning Gateway for Federation, as we call it, then your cost of capital is much lower because you deploy, essentially what you do is you open one big Lightning channel to all Federation users when you connect to Federation. And like you share the liquidity that you provide over all these users. And when you
amortize it basically over everyone.
Like when you imagine if all these users wanted to open actual Lightning channels to you, you would need like a multiple of the capital to achieve like a usable level of capacity. Like you want to have a certain minimum of capacity to route payments to users, and that requires a certain amount of locked up capital per channel. But if you can amortize like your cost of capital over all these users by using like one big channel essentially, then it's just awesome for the LSP.
And it's a little different from having like a vision where you have like custodial Lightning wallet and that node serves all of their users, and there's no way for like any other node operator to come in and like plug in. Like, an interesting thing about this is that you could have these nodes moving around.
I think what you're referring to is the fact that like the Federation has nothing to do with the Lightning Gateway or the LSP. Like any Lightning node or any user that trusts the Federation can equip their Lightning node with a small plugin or like small additional program and make it an LSP for Federation.
And so I think it could be very competitive in like the market sense, which will lead to just everything better, right? And you could have stuff where federations publish some sort of like, or I don't know exactly how, I haven't thought about this much, but like some way to publish some performance, privacy preserving performance statistics. Think of these leaderboards, for like liquidity, right? Like, could you have a similar thing for these sort of mint things,
like routing success and failure statistics?
Yeah, exactly.
For these gateways, and like if you're well connected and like 90% of your routing attempts succeed, and that's much better than like someone who's badly connected and only like 40% of your routing attempts succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that would probably be something that would be information that your software will take into account and then adjust, hopefully automatically for you. You wouldn't, as a user, be seeing that. It's just, but this is the thing. It's running an exchange. We would have a cold wallet and a hot wallet, or our case was a warm wallet. But the amount of capital that we had to hold on the warm wallet was just based on modeling the statistical amount that gets withdrawn by all of our hundreds of thousands of users on average over a period of time, with a little bit of buffer to add in peak periods. That was a tiny fraction of the actual amount of Bitcoin that we held, and it's also a tiny fraction of the actual volumes that were being sent, because we could model that across all users. If you say you had a federation of 1,000 users, and now and again, some of them would potentially send, I don't know, 0.01 Bitcoin even, which is, we're talking about, what is it, $200. That's not that much, but 0.01 Bitcoin. Well, if you were a Lightning service provider and you wanted to individually connect up to all of them, let's just say it could go both ways and you wanted to capitalize it as well, you would have to put 0.01 Bitcoin into each one of these 1,000 users channels on your side, for example, if you wanted to provide a similar level of volume the other way. Well, that's 10 Bitcoin locked up for those 1,000 users. When in reality, most of them may, only do that very rarely and so on. Now, if you've got a federation with 1,000 users, you might find that across all of them, you just need to put in half a Bitcoin, and that gives you the same level of coverage based on the average amount someone is going to use the system. And if it's getting a little bit lower, just like people like an exchange managing their hot wallet, you could top it up out of band and just keep going. And that's just a extremely a more powerful way and more efficient and way of managing your capital if your endpoints are federations. And therefore, you're going to make more profit from it at a much lower cost of capital. And therefore, that's going to lead to a healthy externality for the network, because it's more likely for it to be profitable to be an LSP, especially if you're a Lightning Gateway. And you're going to want customers from that network because it's just a more reliable source of income.
Yeah. Bullish on Lightning liquidity.
As a second order effect, I think what this means that your cost of capital to provide inbound liquidity for users gets lower is that suddenly a bunch of use cases that weren't viable on Lightning so far become viable. Like, for example, like some exchanges already allow you to withdraw using Lightning, but like for how many users is this actually useful? Like currently, if I'm running like my own Lightning node, and it's like a gamble if I will actually be able to receive from an exchange, because typically I don't have that amount of inbound liquidity that I would require for my like stacking, for example. Like when I stack sats, then it's not like a coffee, and you do this in like larger increments. And so if you have these LSPs that are really well connected, I could imagine that for many people, the onboarding experience becomes the exchange pays a Lightning invoice for them, and they never touch the chain actually. That becomes viable because like the cost of providing a certain amount of inbound liquidity is so low if you have a lot of users that are served by the same LSP. And I think that's an amazing future where we're going to, because Lightning makes everything so much better. Like on-chain experience isn't great. And I think if we want to bring Bitcoin to the masses, it has to be Lightning, or at least something that has the same properties as Lightning. Like you have instant settlement, you have relatively low fees, and they're actually dependent on the amount and not on like whatever the mempool is doing right now, and all these things. Yeah. So I think it will have some enormous positive externalities too. Like if we can make Lightning super simple and make it succeed in like 99.9% of the cases, which like most custodial providers already manage, but like most non-custodial, not really, like then we're winning.
Yeah, I mean, if this is successful, it would be massive.
When
it's successful.
No, it will. I'm a very, very, very cautious person, but this is going to be successful.
I agree. I mean, disclaimer: I'm a venture partner at 1031. We are invested in Fedi and grant tours to the Fedimint protocol. Obi, I know you have to go. I'm very excited for what you guys are building. I think we should wrap it up here with some final thoughts from the three of you. What should we look out for in the next 6 months? Where do you see this going? Is there anything you haven't said that you want to say before we wrap up?
Can I start? Because I'll then have to go. But I feel blessed to be working on this project. It feels like everything I've done up to now is leading up to this. And what's coming in the next 6 months is just lots of awesome. I'll leave these guys to say the details. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Obi.
You want to go? I'll go. You go last because it's his idea. Yeah. So I mean, I'd say like my stress is going to be, if you're a developer, check out chat.fedimint.org. That's our open up Discord. Just jump in there and start, be a fly on the wall, ask questions. We got about 130 people in there that are interested in the project, and about 10 or so people that are contributing now. And so, we're really looking for on the open source side, just some talented software developers, Rust developers, to with some really interesting problems. That's the the biggest roadblock currently is just getting the server to work, and then on the Fedi side, Fedimint, Fedi, separate things. On the Fedi side, check us out in Bitcoiner jobs. Just looks up Bitcoiner jobs. We're looking for a mobile developer and a Rust developer there as well. So that's sorry for the shill, but we really need talented people. We need help.
Yeah. So for me, I will be staying on the open source side for most of my time. I'm really excited about onboarding more people to the Fedimint project. It's an open source project. It's amazing. We got already a lot of talented people working on it, and it's just awesome seeing it go from I'm hacking on it alone, as a blockchain researcher, and getting some help from some crazy good people like Tim Ruffing, who helped me with the crypto, and Andrew Polstra, who explained some of the Federation intrinsics to me. But I was essentially working on it alone for a long time, and now I have all these co-contributors, and it's just awesome. And huge thanks, even so he already left, to Obi for talking to everyone who would listen about Fedimint and being such a great spokesperson, pretty much. And then we will get the Fedimint protocol to a state where it's deployable to the real world. And then I hope by the time the team around Fedi will have an awesome app ready, so we can actually use it in the real world. And I want to make this my day-to-day Lightning wallet, so I can dogfood it.
Yeah.
And from there on, we will just improve on both sides. Fedimint will get many more modules, a lot of functionality, and things we can't even imagine yet. Yeah. And on the Fedi side, I will leave that to you guys.
I think it's an interesting project because, there's some really hardcore, I gave a talk about this at a conference, right? And I was like, okay, so we use Musig, we use blinded threshold signatures, we use down the list of consensus algorithms. We use all these really fancy technical ideas that programmers like. And usually when you see that, it's something that's never going to see the light of day in the real world, right? It's usually kind of a red flag. But I think this is actually something we're going to go and deploy it in communities, right? We're going to actually try to go and deploy it in the real world. So I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to work on, because you have this combination of actual hardcore engineering, design, which is a really important thing, and then actual distribution. Right. And then it's, the core thing is all open source, and the app will be as well.
Yeah. I mean, Eric, it's been astonishing how quickly you've built out, with the help of others, this protocol. I believe it was only a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, that you announced that you're working on Minimint and building out this protocol. And to see,
well, Eric, when did you have the idea of how, tell the whole story?
I think the idea was really early, actually.
Because we were just talking about this, and I was surprised to hear the whole saga.
Yeah, I don't think I want to go into all of it, because we will be sitting here for quite a while.
Yeah, but when did it kind of start? Some of the.
Yeah, I think I did the first commit to the Fedimint project in January 2021.
But I think you were saying that you're investigating the ideas like Xiaomi Ncash 3 or 4 years before that.
That happened way before. Yeah. Because when you look at it, Liquid was coming out in 2018, and it's a great project. But I always wondered, why do we need the sidechain?
Yeah.
So from then on, I read a lot about cryptography and thought, hey, this Xiaomi Ncash thing? What if we could build this into Federation? Then the big problem was you kind of need to federate the signature generation. What Xiaomi eCache uses is blind signatures, and we needed special blind signatures, and that took me quite a while. I got distracted again. And at some point, like smuggler Jonathan Logan, he held a presentation at HCPP here in Prague, actually, at Paralelpolis, and was discussing the same concepts, and that reignited my interest in the technology. And then I began working on like an actual implementation for like special plain signatures first, and then of the Federation protocol. I think I began the work on the final prototype, like which we're using now. In like January 2021, I had some other prototypes before, but nothing really worked out. And I announced it in Miami that year, 2021. Like that's the first time I talked about it publicly, I think.
Yeah.
Like I was actually chilling in the Dominican Republic because we couldn't go to Miami directly from the Schengen area. And like registering the domain name and everything, and getting it all set up, and in the open source tent, it was terribly hot. Like I went on stage and announced this project, and it has only been growing ever since.
But yeah, it was interesting to hear that this is actually like a 4-ish year old like project, right? Which is like, I don't know, it was kind of encouraging to me just to hear, you know, like, these things don't happen overnight, you know. It's like slowly building all the primitives to actually make the final thing work. Like it didn't just take a year. It's been going on for longer, actually.
Yeah, I definitely have been thinking about it for a long time.
Yeah.
And actually doing something completely different.
Yeah.
Like that just was like, okay, I have to do it now because hyper-Bitcoinization is happening. And it's just this realization. Yeah. Like if you don't do it, nobody else will.
Yeah.
If not me, then who?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I don't want to use the term black swan because it's bastardized, but for me personally, like seeing, obviously we've seen people talk about side chains, Lightning, when you announce like, hey, I'm going to build this Chaumium mint on top of Bitcoin. That was like a real big wow moment for me. Like nobody's thought about scaling Bitcoin in this way up to this point, at least not from my observation. I had not seen it up to that point. And I think it's a really unique and novel way to get Bitcoin into the hands of the masses, and somewhat, I don't see anybody experimenting with this, not only in Bitcoin, but other chains when they talk about like scaling and privacy technology. I think this is an extremely novel and creative way to bring these properties to Bitcoin users. So shout out to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take many projects like this, right? Like there's no one solution in Bitcoin, right? It's not just like there's no silver bullets, right? We need lots of different groups trying lots of different things, and that's how we figure out, like, get the full product offering that, where there's something for everybody, so we can actually move the world off of fiat onto Bitcoin.
Let's go do it, boys.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Then back to work, I guess.
Well, thank you guys for doing what you do, for joining me today. Go enjoy the rest of your afternoon in Prague, and I'll see you next month, Justin. The Austin crew is missing you terribly.
Absolutely.
Your desk got taken out of the office too, so
Oh, no.
don't expect that to be here when you get back.
Oh man, that's brutal. How they do me like that?
We do have lo-fi music playing during the day now, though. I think you're gonna like that.
Well, I started that. I was the one who figured out how to run the speakers, actually.
Well, thank you for doing that. It's a much better vibe in here now.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Go forth and fucking build the future. Let's go.
Amen.
Amen.
See you next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Peace and love, freaks.